Why don't you tell everyone about your other family? The room went still, the air sucked out of it. Emily's glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the table, and David's face drained of color. I wasn't just exposing their affair. I was about to reveal something even bigger, something that would tear their world apart. The silence was deafening, a vacuum that swallowed every whisper, every clink of cutlery. David's mouth opened, but no words came out, his eyes darting between me and Emily like a trapped animal. Emily's face was a mask of shock, her lips parted, her hands gripping the edge of the table as if to anchor herself. The shattered glass sparkled in the candlelight, wine pooling around the shards like blood. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her chest, while my father's brow furrowed, his confusion palpable. Lila was the only one who didn't look surprised. She'd suspected something for weeks, ever since I'd confided in her about David's late nights. I kept my gaze on David, refusing to let him look away. "Go on," I said, my voice steady, almost playful. "Tell them about the apartment in the city, the one you've been paying for, the one where you've been playing house with Emily." The room erupted in murmurs, heads turning, eyes wide. Emily shook her head, her voice a whisper. "That's not true," she said, but it was weak, unconvincing. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that made her flinch. Found the lease agreement in David's desk. His signature scribblies. The private investigator had given me photos of them together, laughing, kissing, living a life I was never part of. But that wasn't the secret I was about to reveal. That was just the prelude. "And while you're at it," I continued, my eyes locked on David's, "tell them about the other woman in Chicago." His face went from pale to ashen, and Emily's head snapped toward him, her shock morphing into betrayal. The room was a powder keg, and I just lit the fuse. I'd known about Chicago for a month, ever since I'd hacked and found the messages, the plane tickets, the promises he'd made to someone else entirely. This way, David's secrets ran deeper, and I was about to drag them all into the light. The air crackled with tension, and their eyes darting between me, David, and Emily. My cousin Sarah dropped her fork, the clatter echoing in the stunned silence. David's jaw clenched, his hands balled into fists on the table, but he still said nothing. Emily's eyes were wet now, her composure crumbling as she realized the depth of David's deception. "Chicago?" she whispered, her voice breaking, and I almost felt sorry for her. Almost, but she'd made her choice when she stood up to announce her pregnancy. Knowing full well what it would do to me, I leaned forward, my voice low but clear, each word deliberate. "You thought you were the only one, didn't you, Emily? You thought you were special?" Her face crumpled, and she looked at David, waiting for him to deny it, to salvage something. He didn't. He just stared at the table, his silence damning him further. I turned back to the room, my audience captive, their shock fueling me. "David's been funding another life in Chicago," I said. "Another woman, another apartment, another set of lies." I pulled out my phone, the screen glowing with the email I'd forwarded to myself, the one where David promised Lila in Chicago he'd leave me soon. The name wasn't my friend Lila, of course, but a stranger I'd never met, someone he'd been stringing along for over a year. I held up the phone, letting the screen speak for itself, the words cold and undeniable. My mother's hand was over her mouth now, my father's face red with anger. Emily was shaking, her hands covering her face, and David finally looked up, his eyes pleading. "It's not what you think," he started, but I cut him off. "Don't," I said. "You don't get to lie anymore." The room was a battlefield, and I was winning, but I wasn't done. There was one more piece to this puzzle, one more secret that would change everything. The room felt like it was holding its breath, every pair of eyes locked on me, waiting for the next blow. David's plea hung in the air, weak and desperate, but I wasn't here to negotiate. I'd spent too many nights crying, too many days, questioning my own sanity to let him talk his way out of this. Emily was sobbing now, her hands still covering her face, and part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her we'd both been played. But she'd known about me, known I was her sister, and still chose to cross that line. I turned my attention back to David, my voice steady, cutting. You've been busy, haven't you? 2 women, 2 lives, and me, your wife, left him that dark. I paused, letting the words sink in, letting the room feel the weight of his betrayal. My father stood, his chair scraping back, his voice low and dangerous. Is this true, David? He asked, but David didn't answer, his head bowed. I didn't need him to confirm it. Evidence was enough. The emails, the bank transfers, the photos, they painted a picture clearer than any confession. I slid my phone across the table toward my father, the screen still glowing with the Chicago woman's messages. He picked it up, his face darkening as he read. My mother was crying now, her hand clutching Lila's, who looked torn between anger and pity. I turned back to David, my voice rising slightly. But there's more, isn't there? Tell them about the money. His head snapped up, his eyes wide with panic. The money was the real secret, the one I'd uncovered just last week. It wasn't just about affairs. David had been siphoning funds from our joint account, funneling them into his other lives, leaving us on the brink of financial ruin. I'd found the offshore account, the hidden transactions, and I was ready to lay it all bare. Tell them, I said, my voice a whip, or I will. David's silence was his undoing, a confession louder than words. The room was a pressure cooker, the tension so thick it felt like it could choke us all. My father was still standing, his face a storm of rage and disbelief, my phone clutched in his hand. Emily had stopped sobbing, her hands now balled into fists, her eyes burning into David. She wasn't just betrayed by him. She was humiliated, her pregnancy announcement now a twisted mockery. I felt a pang of guilt for her, but it was fleeting. She'd made her bed, and now we were all lying in it. I stepped closer to David, my shadow falling over him, and spoke clearly, each word a hammer. You've been stealing from us, I said. From me, from our future, from the life we built. The room gasped, the accusation landing like a grenade. My cousin Sarah leaned forward, her voice sharp. Stealing? What do you mean? I didn't take my eyes off David. He's been moving money from our joint account to an offshore one, I said. Tens of thousands, maybe more, to fund his apartments, his trips, his other women. I'd found the statements by accident, tucked away in a locked drawer I'd pried open out of suspicion. The numbers didn't lie large transfers, hidden behind vague descriptions, draining our savings. I'd confronted him once, weeks ago, and he'd sworn it was a mistake, a mix-up with his business accounts. But the investigator had dug deeper, uncovering the truth. David was living beyond our means, playing 3 women, 3 lives, with money we didn't have. My mother's voice broke the silence, trembling but firm. How could you do this to her? She asked David, but he just shook his head, mute. I didn't need his answer. I had the proof, and I had the room. There's a paper trail, I said, turning to the guests. Bank statements, emails, everything. I've already sent copies to my lawyer. The room exploded in whispers, and David's head sank lower, defeated. The whispers grew into a roar, the guests no longer able to contain their shock. My father slammed my phone down on the table, the screen still glowing with damning evidence. You're a disgrace, he said to David, his voice shaking with fury. Emily was trembling, her face a mix of anger and devastation, her hands cradling, her stomach as if to protect the baby from the chaos. I felt a strange calm settle over me, the kind that comes when you've crossed a line and there's no going back. I'd spent months in the dark, doubting myself, but now the truth was out. And it was liberating. Lila stood, her chair scraping back, and crossed the room to stand beside me, her hand on my shoulder. "You don't deserve this," she whispered, but loud enough for others to hear. I nodded, grateful for her loyalty, but my focus was still on David. He looked small now, shrunken, not the confident man who'd charmed me into marriage. "You thought you could keep this up forever?" I said, my voice low, almost pitying. "You thought I wouldn't find out." He finally looked up, his eyes red, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry," he said, but it was hollow, meaningless. Sorry didn't undo the lies, the theft, the betrayal. Sorry didn't erase the image of him with Emily, with the woman in Chicago, with the life he'd built behind my back. I turned to the room, my voice steady. "I've already filed for divorce," I said, and the gasps came again, softer this time, as if they were running out of air. "And I've turned over all the evidence to the authorities. They'll be looking into the money, David. All of it." His face crumpled, and for the first time, I saw fear, real, raw fear. The offshore account wasn't just a secret. It was illegal, and he knew it. I'd made sure the investigator flagged every questionable transaction, every shady transfer. The law was coming for him, and I wasn't going to stop it. The room was a tableau of shock and betrayal, every face a mirror of the chaos I'd unleashed. Emily was crying again, but her tears were different now, angry, betrayed, directed at David rather than me. She'd thought she was the only one, the special one, but now she saw the truth. She was just another pawn in his game. My mother was holding my father's arm, her face pale, her eyes darting between me and Emily, torn between her daughters. My father was still standing, his fists clenched, looking like he might cross the room and throttle David himself. The other guests were whispering, some leaning in to share hushed theories, others staring at David like he was a stranger. He was, in a way. The man I'd married was gone, replaced by this thief, this manipulator. I felt a strange detachment, like I was watching this unfold from outside my body. I'd spent so long loving him, building a life with him, and now it was ashes, but I wasn't broken, not anymore. I was angry, yes, but also free. "You don't get to walk away from this," I said to David, my voice cutting through the murmurs. "You don't get to ruin us and just move on." He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand, silencing him. "I'm not done," I said. "You took everything, my trust, my sister, my future, but you don't get to take my dignity." I turned to Emily, who flinched under my gaze. "And you," I said, my voice softer, but no less sharp. "You knew what you were doing. You chose him over me." She shook her head, tears streaming, but I didn't stop. "You'll have to live with that, both of you." The room was silent again, the weight of my words settling over everyone. I'd exposed them, stripped them bare, and now it was time to walk away. The candles were